Testing audio. Bernard, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Awesome, we can hear you. All right, let's get started. Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, good middle of the night, everyone, and welcome to Web Transport. We are meeting today at IETF115. There we go. Most of you probably have seen these, especially if you're here virtually. It means you figured out how to join virtually. But yeah, especially if you're virtual, please use a directional microphone or headphones, otherwise we get bad echo. This is the buttons with the hand allow you to join the queue. It's different from the raise hand button. And this is how you unmute. If you're looking at the slides from the data tracker, here are some useful links. But the note well. So for those of you who have been here all week, you already know it, but I want to take a second to highlight the note well. In particular, the IETF has an IPR policy, so any contribution you make, be it on chat, at the microphone, on the mailing list, triggers your responsibility with regard to patents that you need to disclose if you have any. So if you're not aware of this, please read it before making any contribution. Similarly, this contains our code of conduct, which ensures that we all work together nicely and professionally. Luckily, we haven't had a problem here, so let's keep it that way. If you see anything that might amount to harassment or other problems, please contact the chairs or the ombuds team or anyone in leadership. We're all happy to help resolve these situations. As a reminder, this IETF has the roughly same mask policy as last time, so please keep your mask on most of the time. You can remove it briefly to eat or drink, but that is not an excuse to keep it off for the entire time. If you're in the room. If you're alone at home, you do you. Would we have a volunteer for note taker, please? I really need to cue the Jeopardy music for this one. So I'm looking at some newcomers. That's a great way to help out. If you'd like, not twisting anyone's arm, but that is always much appreciated by the community. The notes really don't need to be perfect. If you look at those from any other meeting, it's just a rough idea, especially now that we have the YouTube video. So is anyone willing to take notes, please? Everyone's like staring at their laptop instead of making eye contact. Wow. It's okay. We just won't. Oh, thank you very much. Appreciate it. If you can take them in the notes.ietf.org, there's a link from the agenda or from the slides. And anyone else, if you want to jump in and help, that's much appreciated. Thank you. And please put your name at the top so I can probably thank you in the email. Right. This is our agenda. As per is often the case here at Web Transport, we're going to do an update on what's going on at the W3C, then discuss the capsule design team and its impact on H2 and H3 and other H2 and H3 open issues. Then we have a specific topic on reliably resetting streams from Martin. And then we'll see if we need any hums and wrap up. Would anyone like to bash this agenda? All right. With this, Will.
Yes. Let me just confirm the mic's working all right.
Yes.
It is. Okay, thank you. Happy middle of the night from California. My name is Will Law from Akamai. I co-chair the W3C group along with Yanni Barberi from Mozilla. So we have 3 quick slides on updates and then a slide with 4 questions for this group, which I think would hopefully be the bulk of our time. So just an update since we last presented July 26th. We've updated our working draft. The latest revision happened on October 11th. The charter is in the midst of being extended through to December 31st, 23. We're actually just past our charter limit currently, but we're in process, so we're fine from a W3C perspective. Our timetable for the year, we're really trying to move to candidate recommendation. It requires stability in the API, and also our proposed recommendation, the next step, requires 2 independent implementations. Google have implemented in Chrome, Mozilla are close on Firefox, so we should reach that hopefully within Q1. Our goal is publish in the to publication in the first half of next year. Milestone status, we have a candidate recommendation. That's the one we track closest. It has 10 issues. Actually, should have updated the slide here. 8 open and 5 ready for PR. Next slide, please. So just some updates for you. I won't go through them. I won't read through all this text in detail. I think the one most meaningful for this group is we added a new congestion control constructor argument. So it's an enum. It has 3 values: default, throughput, and low latency. So you give them an indication of what type of congestion control you would like the user agent to invoke on your behalf in the web transport connection that you're instantiating. If you ask for low latency, and it feels it's able to comply with that request in some way, then when you query back the getter, the property, it will echo back low latency. But if you ask for low latency and it feels it can do nothing special for you, it's going to echo back default. So you have a little bit of feedback as to if there's any ability of the user agent to accommodate your request. It has been pointed out that low latency and throughput might not be antagonistic goals, especially as we look at L4S and other congestion controls. In that case, the very broad default would probably suffice. A couple of editorial changes. We also want to thank Bernardo Boba for contributing sample code, both for a simple echo server and then an echo server with pub sub on video. It's really been instrumental in moving forward some of the early work around web transport on the web.
Well, it looks like we have a question from the room.
Okay, let's pause for questions. Go ahead.
Jonathan Lennox, is that decision about whether low latency can be done before the connection is established? Because I'm concerned about the case where you have a congestion control algorithm that wants, I'm thinking in particular of, say, the timestamp extension, and I can use it, and I can implement Google congestion control if I have timestamps on the other side, but I can't if I don't. So, which means you wouldn't know until after the connection is established whether you got the low latency congestion or not. Is that something you've thought about?
I believe it's correct values only after the connection's established and it's ready. But there are other group members here, Bernard or David even. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I can answer on that one. This is part of the constructor in JavaScript. So at least for now in Chrome, we don't pool multiple web transport sessions in different connections. So you would always have this information when creating the connection. Else, even if we do implement pooling, you could totally say, oh, this connection isn't valid for this constructor. We'll create a new one. So I think we're covered because this is on the constructor. It's not something you can change later.
Sorry, no, what I mean is that it might depend on whether the peer supports certain quick features.
Ah, I see. So I think, and Will, you can correct me if I'm wrong. In the constructor, you say, hey, I want to do this. And then when you query it later, the value will depend on what happened during the connection setup.
Okay,
Yeah,
great.
you can't query it immediately, right? You need to wait for the connection to be ready before you can then query whether it was able to comply with your congestion control request. So the code wouldn't literally be what you see on the screen right there. Bernard is next for Q.
Yeah, I think Jonathan's question may also have been about whether web transport requires some of these timestamp options, and the answer is no. I don't know if Jonathan wants to come back and clarify that, but anyway, this is just about the congestion control algorithm that would be implemented on the web transport client. It doesn't influence what's on the server or anything like that.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So we have two main issues of debate. The first remains around prioritization. We have three issues up there. And we've proposed over the last few months various ever more complicated APIs, constructs around flows of short-lived streams, for example, and waiting schemes. The latest issue there comes from myself, which is, as a baseline, maybe we should consider simply doing the minimum necessary to support MOC, Media Over Quick, which has a simple, relatively simple requirement for ever escalating priorities. So we have not resolved this issue. It's an issue of debate, but that's on the books. The second remaining large issue is the stat surface. We've had prior discussion around packet arrival departure times, latest RTT and ECN information. Peter Thatcher's put forward a PR that resolves that to a single property, basically expressing available throughput. And there's also debate over what's the time base over that value. So we have other issues, obviously, before we can go to release, but these are the two main ones. Next slide, please.
Looks like we have another question. Alan?
Oh, sorry, I'm not watching the queue. Alan?
Yeah. No worries.
Alan from Dell, Meta, and Priority Enthusiast. I guess I just want to, and also mock co-chair. Mock is in its very early days, and if you were in our mock session this morning, you know there's still a lot of debate about what's going on with priority. So if you want to wait for mock to define what its priority scheme is going to be before you finalize your API, it may take a very long time. And so I think the recommendation I would make is make it, whatever you do, don't get overcomplicated and make it flexible and extensible as much as you can and from an API perspective so that it can catch whatever we land on there, because we could be talking about it for a long time.
Noted well, thank you. David, back to you.
A related question to Alan's point. Would it be possible to ship like a first version of web transport without priorities and then add that later? Or do you think it's important for the first version?
We have some difference of opinion. I personally think it's important for the first version because it seems necessary to implement one of our strongest use cases, which is the web conferencing use case. In other words, a client sending real-time audio and video to a server. It's working well today under good network conditions, but it doesn't work well under poor network conditions. So we feel that we need some type of prioritization scheme to be able to make that happen.
That makes sense. Thank you. Bernard?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify here. You know, priority isn't free. In that when you do that and have the strict sending, then you lose concurrency. And you know, for the, at least for the conferencing case, I don't agree that it's required to do that. And in fact, when I've done the samples, it can actually be harmful. So I guess, you know, I agree with Alan that it's something that should probably be extensible, but you know, I'm not really sure that it's actually absolutely required for the first version.
Bernard, would you be comfortable leaving it out of the first version completely, as opposed to
Well,
trying to get something generic and extensible that might accommodate future requirements?
I would say that the goal should be what Alan said, which is figuring out a way, making sure that it's not precluded. Let me put it that way. Rather than because yeah, and also, you know, there can be some experiments, because I think you just have to be very careful, because priority goes hand in hand. You can't get both have priority and claim to get rid of head of line blocking. Right, I want strict priority of my frames. Well, if one of them retransmits, then you're holding up everything in the queue. So anyway, it's not a free lunch.
Okay. Whoop, slides disappeared.
Yep, sorry, my meet echo is saying unstable connection to the server. I think it's reconnecting. 1 second.
Then next slide. Okay, so here are our 4 questions, and I'd like to take them one at a time. If I read all 4, then we tend to lose some of them. So the first one is, will web transport as defined by this group in the IETF include a send priority mechanism which W3C user agents can then leverage directly? So we can define something on the send side of user agents, but is there an underlying protocol-based send priority that it could be tied into consistently? Alan?
Alan Frindell. Yeah, I think Martin made this point a second ago in the chat, which is that the web transport protocol as it's being defined in IETF does not have a way to signal priority over the wire, and I don't think we plan to create one. The API consideration is very much about the JavaScript code being able to communicate to its local implementation how it would like things to be prioritized before they leave that endpoint.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. And that pretty much answers the second question then. How will priorities be signaled consistently through intermediate relays? I think we can take that answer to satisfy number 2. Number 3, can web transport require an L4S friendly low latency congestion control such as Prague? And this, I think, is probably what I was alluding to in the prior question, and Bernard may want to add more color here, that we feel this is necessary for a client to send video in a congested environment up to a server in real time.
David Skenazy speaking as individual contributor. So L4S is not just a congestion controller. It's a congestion controller and a marking system using ECH and an AQM algorithm. So for it to work properly, you need your bottleneck link to implement some specific kind of smart queuing. And the idea is L4S, like the short of it is you have a shorter queue that L4S gets into, but it promises not to grow the queue. There are a lot of folks working on those, and we saw like there are a lot of progress at the hackathon, but they're not deployed yet. And most importantly, web transport can't do requirements on anything that's not the endpoints. So additionally, yeah, on the server. So I don't think requiring it from web transport is feasible. It's saying that, you know, being able to have this is great, but if you're on a network that doesn't do it, you're kind of stuck. Eric?
Okay.
So Eric Kinnear, Apple. I think even if you take that in a slightly more narrow definition of on the endpoint and only on the endpoint, can we require essentially, you know, non-queue building flows, regardless of what queuing mechanism is happening elsewhere in the network, it's still a little bit unclear as to what why we would actually want to be able to require that. I think this kind of comes back to number 2, and I don't want to reopen that if we've got a nice no answer, but like, I think the sentiment that I'm feeling, which I think might be shared, is like, we're not currently planning to signal priorities. We're not currently planning to try to require that kind of congestion control. But that doesn't mean that that could never happen. That means that like right now, there is no clear use case for why you would need to signal those priorities as opposed to having it be an endpoint only thing. Similarly, for question 3, like, I'm not seeing a huge reason that you would want to require that everybody anywhere ever doing web transport can only do prog or something similar, as opposed to simply making it available for an implementation that needs one.
I think it wasn't a mandate. The request is not that it's the only one, that it's an available choice that could be selected by a client. But I think Bernard's next in queue, and this was a request directly from him, so he may want to.
Well, it wasn't AI. My question, I guess, was probably to you, Eric. Have you seen implementations of Quick that have prog and support L4S?
Have I seen? Yes.
Okay.
I'm aware of at least one. But even if it's available, we're saying that you can't call it web transport if it doesn't offer prog. Because I think when we went into because when we were talking about, hey, for congestion control, I want to request low latency, that is very much a request. And even if you have prog on your local endpoint, that does not necessarily mean that we would consider what you're getting to be low latency. So I'm a little bit hesitant to say that we're going to like say this is a thing and everybody should go off being happy and then be surprised down the line when that's not what they got.
Yeah. Anyway, having this available, I think, to play with to see if it addresses the some of the low latency use cases would make sense, but that's probably something outside of this meeting.
No, I think the feedback here is the answer for 3 is no. It might be fun to experiment, but we cannot require it, and it cannot be relied upon to be present. Martin's next for Q, I think.
So I am. Hello. I think we've answered the priority questions adequately. I think there's a lot of space in here for signaling, but that will be very much application specific. And really all that we can do at this layer is provide an API. That's thankfully not a problem that the IETF has to concern themselves with. There's a bunch of people who have some experience in that area who can take that to the W3C. I think that's probably the cleanest way to manage that. I think on point 3, what we have with the application expressing a preference for the way in which congestion control is managed, but leaving implementations, and by implementations I mean browsers and servers, to just sort of compete on the quality of their congestion control algorithms is probably the most sensible approach. Having a mandate for a very specific set of congestion controllers is not sensible in my mind. The last one I'm a little more sort of on the fence on, but I think probably in the short term the answer is no. The timestamp option does help in some very narrow cases, but at the same time it seems like you can get a long way without it. So I'm going to sort of say maybe no. There's a whole lot of information that a congestion controller might need in order to run something in JS, but that presumes that you're willing to trust the JavaScript to run a congestion controller for you, and I don't.
Thanks, Martin. Before we go to Christian, I'm going to cut the queue soon. So if you want to comment on this topic, please join the queue. Christian, you're next.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much with Martin on this. I mean, certainly for congestion control, I have a fundamental issue there is that congestion control is a property of the connection as a whole, and web transport is only using part of the connection. So you might even have 2 web transport sessions on the same quick connection, And what if those two web transports make different demands? That'll be really weird. The other point I have on all of those is that we have here requests that surface capabilities of the underlying stack. I am a bit concerned about the privacy implication of those things. I mean, are we just increasing the fingerprinting surface? I mean, can we say that, oh, I see that they do support L4S. That means that must see one of those client implementation. I mean, we have to analyze when we do things like that, what's the privacy impact? And based on that, I would say no to everything there. And as for the timestamp option, I'll be more than willing to get feedback and update the draft accordingly.
Thank you.
Hey, Luke from Twitch. So fortunately, Christian opened Pandora's box for me, but pooling. There's some on the previous slide you exposed some network stats like the estimated bit rate, RTT, congestion controller. It doesn't really make sense when you're pooling. So it seems like at least the JavaScript API is assuming no pooling. Or is that true?
Well, there's a property to know if it's pulled or not. Firstly, so we know that, and the current implementations are only not pulled. They're a dedicated connection. And it may stay that way on the website. We'll see what the competing applications come out with.
Yeah. Oh, new connection, you're right.
Jonathan, next, I said this in the chat, but I thought I'd repeat it in response to what Martin said. I think the point of the JavaScript-based congestion control is not to replace the congestion controller, but to provide additional congestion control, specifically to avoid queue building behaviors, either in the network or in your local output buffers, to keep your latency low, even if you have a default congestion controller. I think that's the point of that. And I think there have been some experiments, early experiments with like RTP over Quick that have gotten reasonable results with that. Basically, avoid the queue, keep the queues low, keep your latency low over a default congestion controller.
Yeah, that was indeed the requirement. It wasn't that people wanted to implement congestion control in JavaScript. It was to try to improve the delivery, and to do it on top of the existing congestion control that's happening in the base layer is very difficult. And I think you're referencing the AVT core work that was done over BBR, if I remember correctly then.
So there was Randall in the queue between Jonathan and Peter, but I'm assuming that you're not intending to be there. That's fine. Or all right, Peter.
Gotcha. I was going to say roughly the same thing as Jonathan, that we wouldn't be, if we added an API, which we don't currently have, but if we added one for number 4, it would not be trusting the JavaScript with congestion control. It would just be allowing it to go lower than whatever built-in congestion control there is. If it wants to, it wouldn't be allowed to go higher necessarily. So that's in response to Martin's comment. I think there might be potential for doing something like that, but it's something that needs to be explored. And I don't think that the quick timestamp option is even mature enough yet to be something we can rely on. So I think while number 4 has potential, it's not something that is mature enough, either with the extension or to see if this whole idea can work to be something we can mandate right now.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Peter. Well, I was in the queue as an individual as well, but everyone already said it, so +1. As chair, my read of the situation is I'm getting agreement in the room for no on all 4 points. I'm going to reopen the queue briefly in case someone wants to disagree, just so we can have that. But we're not going to run a formal consensus call, because I don't think you're asking for a full liaison statement here. But if anyone wants to disagree, here's your chance. We're going to spend like a couple minutes, but I think otherwise it's no on all points.
I'd just like to say, I think it's no on all points, but not like a no and you should be sad for doing it, more of like a no, and if there's a cool use case that really needs this, or like if there is a place where you do need to signal priorities, like that is an open thing. So I don't think this is a no, we're uninterested in what you're trying to solve. It's more of a, from what we're aware of for what you're trying to solve, we don't think any of these things are needed, but that's not a like no and stop talking.
Yep.
And I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads in the room. Yep, I totally agree with that myself. All right. Thanks, Will.
Yep. Well, that concludes our slides. Thank you very much. I'll relay that back to W3C Web Transport. Thank you.
Cheers. And Eric, let's chat about Web Transport for HTTP 2. Oh. Is that a thing? Well,
I don't know. If you do that, I think it'll just give you the whole slide deck all over again.
that's probably. I don't know. I pressed the button.
Cool. Hey, look at that. Sweet. Let's talk about capsules. We've been doing this for a while. We got some capsules. There's some more capsules. We should do capsule stuff. Concretely, we've now removed basically all of the stuff we were talking about flow control from the capsule design team pull requests at this point. So we've ripped a bunch of stuff back out. We have left a very little bit of it in. So we've left all of the stuff for H2 because none of our reordering issues occur in H2 because H2 is conveniently on top of this nice, reliable, ordered protocol. And there's a little bit of base text for session-based flow control that is still in H3. There's some settings changes that we'll talk about later. And otherwise, this just converts everything over to take our existing TLVs and call them capsules and list them in this nice new list of capsules that we have. So this is now fairly minimal. Please actually go read and review. You've seen this diagram at 3 IETFs by now. It has not changed. So let's land it and move on so we can stop looking at this diagram. We're going to talk a little bit later in Victor's section about how we negotiate web transport.
Eric, just very briefly, jumping in as chair, we did a consensus call on the list from the output of the design team that Eric just presented, and didn't get any response because, like, you know, everyone who had been involved was mostly part of the team. So we're assuming consensus is we're gonna merge that. The call actually ended 3 days ago, and I forgot to say that. So unless you want to jump up and scream now, but otherwise, like, that's getting merged like pretty much today or whenever we get time.
Beautiful. Thank you. And thank you to the folks who did review. I know Martin gave multiple great rounds of review, so thank you for that. Sweet. Thank you, chairs. All right. Yes. Negotiating web transport. So we talked a little bit about this at the previous IETF. We have decided that we would like to independently signal support across all the different layers, whereas up until the previous IETF, we had said that pick the highest layer, and saying settings enable web transport implies settings enable connect protocol and everything else. Some implementation experience said that's actually really, really painful when you're implementing because it means that you have to teach your quick datagram implementation about web transport and about the extended connect protocol and everything in between. And so that ends up being mildly painful, especially because some of the settings don't show up until after you need to have looked at the transport parameters anyway. So when you suddenly start getting in datagrams, you're like, hey, I'm annoyed now. So these are likely to become totally separate things. There's a slide and an issue for it later, so we can talk about it globally for H3 and H2. But we have made the same adjustments to the H2 doc as we are likely to agree to making in the H3 doc. One piece of update from the last time we talked about this, we had said that we wanted to switch completely from settings enable web transport over to settings web transport max sessions. And just if you set it to a non-zero value, that implies that you enable web transport. When actually writing that in with a keyboard into a document, that got a little bit more thorny because settings web transport max sessions set to a non-zero value implies that you're willing to accept an incoming session from the other side. And that's a little bit weird for a client that is not allowed to open web transport sessions. So this is a place where it would be nice to have input from the folks in this room. Should we have both sides just continue to send enable because settings are cheap and it's not that hard, and then the server sends max sessions? Or should we try to put in some fancy text that says that like the client just always sets it to 1 or something like that? Or try to do some weird definition of having 0 not mean 0 anymore.
Ooh, I smell a bike shed.
It's my favorite kind. All right.
0 and 1's fine. I'd also be okay with 0 and non-zero if the client wants to tell the server how many it intends to create, if it knows. But that I don't think we need 2 settings, but 0 and 1's probably best for the client.
So the client would set it to 1 to indicate support for web transport, and just
Yeah,
have a note that
I
says
might
that
make
doesn't
one.
actually mean that anybody can create anything to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
1.
Just 0 and 1 I think is most sensible. I don't think there's any need or value in the client saying 100. I just can't imagine what client would know how many sessions it would create at the time it makes the connection.
Right.
So yes, true or false, which is a bit weird, but better than having two settings.
Is that actually better than having 2 settings where you send, one person just sends both?
So settings like cost the same either way. So this is just double the cost, and we're going to be sending them on every connection.
Yeah, that's
every connection we make to any web server will have this setting in it. If you make us send 2, we're going to be spending all of those extra bytes, and we do kind of care about those bytes. So one's best.
Thank you.
Victor?
I moderately prefer 2 settings because I currently use settings enable web transport for versioning the draft protocols. So if we don't use it for that, we would have to come up with some alternative way of doing that.
Can you describe a little bit more what you mean when you say versioning? So you're not setting it to 0 or 1, you're setting it to some version number?
Well, no, we have setting enable web transport, and the current code point is for draft 02. And the way we determine which version of web transport you speak is we find the highest enable web transport code point.
But Victor, you can do that with web max sessions, right? Oh, sorry to jump in.
If both sides send that, sure.
Yeah, that was the proposal. Both sides send it, and the client sends 0 or 1.
Okay, and then we rotate that as an indicator for version. Okay, I'm fine with that.
Correct.
Too.
You just change the type of the setting, not the value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Alan?
Alan Frindell. Since web transport sessions are client initiated, aside from the use case Victor just mentioned, which is a strange way to version the protocol anyway, but okay. What if the client didn't have to announce support via setting, and the server says, I could handle 1 or more web transport sessions, and then the client sends it one, and it's like, oh, the client supports web transport. Otherwise, what will you do other than just the client says, I don't support it, and then sends you a web transport session? It's like, aha, I got you. You get an error.
Hey, Lucas Bardu, Cloudflare. I like Alan's suggestion just there. I think the comment I was going to make was about defaults. I didn't hear anything about defaults yet, and then maybe it's in the spec I didn't read, but like what the default would be off, I suppose, unless you get the setting that says it's on, and then everything's a lot simpler. So
yes,
do that.
Default would be 0, and depending on, is there anybody with a particular peer-to-peer use case that would want to be able to signal this from both sides, or would that just be its own extension that says now the client sends it and then the server can do stuff and we can move on? Sweet, Jonathan.
Yeah, Jonathan. I mean, I'm not sure why you need to have, wouldn't having just the client send enable and the server, meaning I can create web transport, but don't create them to me, basically have a different, don't have, basically the same semantic as max session 0, but it means max session 0, but I do web transport. And so basically this can be asymmetric. Basically, you can have enable meaning not actually enable, but I'm willing to, I am able to create them.
That's essentially the current meaning of settings enable web
Yeah,
transport.
but then you would say, but rather than both sides send enable, just have client send enable.
So we could have them both send a setting and have them send different settings,
Yeah,
but
exactly.
at that point, what value, to Alan's point, like what value are you getting out of having the client send anything?
I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, I guess the question is if your implementation is such that like the web transport stuff and the HTTP3 stuff are different parts of your stack, and you need to transfer the socket over to a different part of the to handle a different part of your code, or even a different process or something. That would be the only reason I would think. But
right. Well, and if that's a use case that somebody has or a need that they have, like let's talk about it now before we take away your setting.
That was what I was up here to ask. No, David was ahead of me, but now I'm, yeah, and never mind.
Go for it.
Does anyone need to know? And I think I can probably answer that question. So does any server need to know that if a client does web transport? And I think there may be cases where servers need to know, but in those scenarios, you can put the server on a different host name and the client will be able to connect to them and do the magic stuff that way rather than looking at other things. I like Alan's suggestion. If we can make ourselves happy with the fact that the servers won't know until the connect arrives.
Right, and the server is going to get an opportunity to see that a connect came in, that it did say it supported, and that everybody said was totally on board. Now you get in this list of protocols, and one of them is web transport, and the server says, "Oh, I guess the client supports it."
And now I have to ask, how many people how many people building clients would pay attention to a redirect in response to that connect?
We might.
David Skenazy, I was initially going to say that the client should send it because like this modifies HTTP semantics and it tells the server that yes, you can send server initiated bidirectional streams. And that's how we generally do that in HTTP. But then I remembered that I really don't care, either way works. And Victor's versioning thing from the client can be done as a header as well. All of these work. So now with my chair hat on, I'm gonna cut the queue after Mike and Luke, so we don't spend the whole time on this bike shed, but go ahead. Ooh, Lucas, sneaky.
I will be very brief and just say it does not seem like there's any actual information here that the server needs to receive from the client. The client needs to receive the number of sessions, and anything other than 0 implies everything the client needs to know. So let's just have one setting sent in one direction and be done.
Hi, Luke. Fringe use case, but worth saying. My server is only web transport. I don't want to serve HTTP3. So if Quick connects to me and it doesn't support web transport, I want to close the connection so it's not just wasting resources. But it's kind of fringe.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's the kind of like, hey, I have a legitimate reason I need this to be sent. So if those exist, now's the time.
Hey, Lucas Party, just a quick one. What was I forgot what I was going to say. Damn. Oh, quite often we think of settings as the only way to negotiate a semantic change in HTTP 2 or 3. The spec doesn't require that. It can be whatever else we would come up with. So that would fit potentially this as well.
Thanks. As chair, the sense from the room that I'm getting is there's some opinions, but no one feels overly strongly, and there seems to be a sense of the room for one setting only sent from the server. Can someone not live with that?
Crickets.
Victor in the chat objects to, can you come to the mic, Victor, then?
As I said, the versioning thing cannot be done via the only server thing because you have to understand which version you speak. So for instance, between 2 and draft 04, we decided that we're banning on bidirectional streams will require web transport session frame to be in the very front, and that would be a breaking wire change, and we have to know on client and server have an agreement on which version is actively being used.
Clarifying question, Victor. Can't you do that with a header on the request?
No, because by that time, because that is because one, the header is per request, not per connection. So you have to like cache it once. And two, you can receive that bidirectional stream before you say receive the open connect because they're asynchronous. So by the time you just receive web transport data, you might not see the header in the first place.
So I think we have two concrete options here. Option one is the server sends settings web transport max sessions. You can encode a version in the type of the thing that it sends there if you like. And when the client sends extended connect, you can always mint a draft specific protocol token, just like we did with ALPN for H3 and things like that, right? And that arrives with the extended connect. There's no asynchrony happening there. There's no reordering possible. The other concrete option is we say both sides send max sessions and we just define one from a client to be a sentinel value that means I support it, but I'm not willing to accept any incoming web transport sessions. It sounds like we were leaning towards the first option there, not the second option there.
Does that work for you, Victor? Can you live with that?
I'm sorry, I filled them. Could you repeat that again?
Yes. So option one, the server sends settings web transport max sessions to some non-zero value, and the type of that of that setting encodes your version. And when the client sends extended connect, you can always mint a new protocol entry. So right now we just call it web transport, but you could always call it web transport -02 or however you want to signal support for different draft versions of things, just like we did with ALPN for H3. Your second option is settings web transport max sessions is sent by both sides. You've encoded the version in the type of that setting, and we define one for the client to be a sentinel. That means that I'm not accepting any web transport sessions at all, but I do support web transport, and you can then infer the version from the type of the setting that was sent.
Yeah, and
so if we would like to go with the first option, can you live with that over the second?
First option. I'm thinking about the ways that what currently we have works, and I have serious doubts.
Okay, we can always take that to the list too. I think it would be fine for us to ask for feedback.
Yeah, that's Martin.
Yeah, I just realized that with the first design, the server can advertise support for multiple versions, and clients can exercise whichever one they choose simply by indicating the version in the header field. The challenge with the other design is that if the client can't support multiple versions, you don't have any version negotiation available, because if the client says, oh, I support draft 15 and draft 16, then when it exercises that option later, there's no way of knowing which one it concretely is using. So I'm like even stronger on option one now.
Yeah. To answer that, just we made that work for HTTP datagrams, where we said in the draft, if multiple versions are supported, the latest one is what is agreed on. So that you can make that work.
You can sort of make it work. Okay. Yeah. But even still, I'm still send nothing ever from the client. Save the bits.
Victor?
I was about to make the same remarks. This is the ways they version when HTTP datagrams work is you pick the max version.
Yeah. So given all the conversation, Victor, can you live with this, or should we take this to the list?
I think we should take it to the list. I can imagine us living with this long term, as in when we ship the final version, we delete the client-side setting.
All right, let's take it to the list. Thanks.
All right, moving right along. Flow control in H2. This is way easier than flow control in H3. We have a setting. It limits the number of sessions. We just spent a good long time talking about it. Follow that thing, respect the limit, don't screw it up. That is all. All right, so we are now in a place where we have read and reviewed some of these PRs. So thank you to the folks who did that. Sounds like we're going to send a thing closing our consensus call on that, at which point we will just merge things.
Yep. Well, and please, if I see Victor Martin, keep the conversation going in the chat if you can resolve it there. Otherwise, we can do it on the list. Let's not please face plant on the settings like this is the silliest part of the protocol. Oh, for next time, don't close the slide. They've added a button so where I can reclaim control now. Yeah, no worries. Anyway, cool. Then, oh, right. No, Victor's not going to continue the conversation. He's going to be up here presenting. Let me share preloaded slides. Share. Yes, you can send multiple settings in H3. And Victor, can you request slide transfer or whatever that's called? Nope, too far. All right, you're muted, but you should have control of the slides. Still muted. The slides are maybe, is he trying to say something in Morse code?
We can't. Am I not muted now?
All right, now we can hear you.
Okay. So I'm doing the presentation for Web Transport over H3 open issues. There are plenty of those, but most of those are actually either addressed by the previous presentation, i.e. the design team output, or they're addressed by the presentation that Martin will make later. So first of all, the update on what actually got merged, which is one issue, is that we have a clarification text on that when exactly you can open new streams and datagrams, and the client can basically open them as soon as it opens Extended Connect. Now let's discuss open issues. There are 3 of them, and one of them I think is easy, and 2 of them are hard. So the first issue that I think is relatively easy is that we have a proposal, is that currently we have settings enable web transport or settings max web transport sessions that currently tells you that everything, all depending features are enabled. And the proposal is that it should no longer do that, and that we explicitly require you to opt in into supporting A, capsules, B, quick datagrams, C, HTTP datagrams, and D, extended connect. And you need all of those in order, explicitly negotiated in order for web transport to work. I believe this is a correct proposal and we should adapt it. The only reason this used to not work this way is that the settings extended connect was not even defined for HTTP 3 when the originally this draft was written, and now that it's written, I believe we should adopt this proposal. Do people have any opinions or comments on this? Alan?
Alan Frindell. So I actually got web transport implementation working this week with Chrome, and it was a huge pain to figure out why Chrome did not like my server for a long time. And I think the thing I don't like about this proposal is that there's 4 different ways you can screw up and fail your handshake. And it might be easier if there was just like, yes, I want to do web transport. Damn it.
Alan, my answer to this is please file a bug for better developer tooling for Chrome, because this is definitely something I have that has frustrated me in the past, and I don't think we can get rid of all of those issues. So we definitely need more informative tooling to tell you why your server got rejected and it's just a matter of writing the code. Eric?
So is that a case where it is just a developer tooling thing, or is that actually going to be a huge pain for everybody? Because I would be strongly in favor of not having to teach all my different layers about each other quite as explicitly here. So the annoyance in debugging is annoying, but doesn't imply a ton of code writing.
Just to reply, I think maybe it makes quick datagrams are a totally different layer, and I didn't like having it for HTTP datagrams. I think extended connect was kind of the one that felt like, why do I have to opt into this? But anyway, sorry.
Jonathan Lennox, I think listing them all explicitly is probably a good idea, because otherwise in 5 years we're going to be in a situation where, okay, you send, you want these 15 features and this one implies these 4, but not these other 3, and it'll be a complete mess rather than just list them all from the start. That said, I feel like there should be clear direction on what to do if somebody gives you a nonsensical response, like, I support web transport but not extended connect or something like that. So, or HTTP datagrams but not quick datagrams. There should be a clear indication of just, if somebody has something nonsensical, just tear it down and consider it a complete failure. Don't try to continue.
And Jonathan, either Medeco glitched or you cut in front of Mike and Lucas. So no big deal. Just for next time. Go ahead, Mike.
Well, somewhat to repeat what he just said, that if you try to do web transport without having turned on one of these features it depends on, it should throw an error that says I don't have my required dependencies, and that will help with debugging. I will point out that technically quick datagrams is not a hard dependency for HTTP datagrams because we have a datagram capsule. I wouldn't, but we added the requirement that it be in there. So it's not quite nonsensical, it's just prohibited. But yes, you should always explicitly negotiate the features that you need and then fail if the ones you need are not present. Don't try to imply things, because that way lies madness.
Thank you, Lucas.
Hello, Lucas Pardew. The comment, sorry, I just got invoked to say dev tooling's really awful at all of this layer. I'm very pessimistic it's going to get better. I want to put energy into it and try and work with the community to do it, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that happening. It's going to make web transport interrupt difficult for us. The best bet we can get is probably seeing like a 400 or 500 response to a connect UDP coming back. But anything else is like going to be super tricky, but we should do a lot better.
David Skenazy, speaking as an individual. Yeah, I'm very strongly in favor of using the setting for every feature that we use, because like we have points in our stack that, let's say, validate the pseudo headers, and like I'd rather like not teach web transport to parts that don't need to, personally. So now, speaking as chair, Alan, you sound in the rough. Can you live with this? All right. Cool. I'll repeat this in the mic for anyone remote. Alan says he's fine with it. So I think we have rough consensus here. Thanks for that, Alan. Appreciate it.
All right, let's move on to the next issue, which is a bit more complicated. What do we do with HTTP redirects? So during the last meeting, we all agree that we definitely should have either a must support redirect or a must not support redirect, because anything else is just highly unpleasant developer experience. And everyone was leaning, and the general consensus in the room was leaning towards supporting them and requiring their support. And I went and I asked Adam Rice, who was the reason I originally we did not support redirects, is what are the pitfalls with that. And he made a reply, which is you can read on the issue tracker, of one of the potential attack on redirects. But so the more I think about it, the more I come to conclusions that redirects have a lot of really unpleasant semantic edge cases. And a lot of them revolve around the fact that in order to send a redirect to a web transport resource, you need to use a connection that supports web transport, but redirect is something that a server that either supports or does not support web transport can reply with. So what happens if you get a redirect for a web transport resource and it redirects you to somewhere where it does not support web transport? Or can you what should we handle redirects and attempt to fetch for those redirects in cases when we are on a connection that does not support web transport in the first place? And then the second issue is, okay, we currently allow client to start sending streams before getting reply from the server. And this has the obvious problem of, okay, we send some data on the streams to the server, and now we got redirected. What happens to those streams? And that is the second problem we have to deal with this. So my personal current inclination is that we should not support redirects because we will have to deal with all of those. And I would like to know what people in the room think about this. Martin.
Yeah, I think we should support them. I think that the first two are very, very easy. If you ever hit a server that doesn't support web transport, don't send it a request requesting web transport. That's just a failure condition. That's just another one of the things on the checklist that Alan was talking about before. This is difficult to get right, but you only really have to get it right once. Item potency is interesting, which sort of led me to ask the question. So you're connecting and you're sending, I don't know, what are you sending on this thing? You're sending stream data. What's the stream limit on the other end? Do we have a default? Can we guarantee that you'll have a bidirectional stream to create and send on? I don't know, especially not in the H2 case anyway. Maybe in the H3 case because you're just taking from a global pool that you already know the size of. But I'm tending towards the conclusion here that that is difficult, and I'm not sure what to do with it. If it's just stuff that's sent in the payload of the request, then it's relatively straightforward. And I think that's all you're allowed to really do before you get confirmation that something is done. So maybe just replay it. Is that right? Eric's nodding. I think if we make the semantics of a 3xx in a response that none of the payload of this request was processed, if you're doing a connect and you get a redirect, then you can just take those bytes and send them on the next one. It'll be fine. If you have anything other than that, and I think this is really, really, really difficult, I'm not actually sure how we're going to do this for H2. The more I think about it, you can do some bookkeeping, but you won't be able to do any stream data because our default stream limits are 0, aren't they? Yeah.
Hi, Alex Tranowski, Google. I'm reminded of some of the zero cost extensibility questions that we had in the mask working group. And I feel like this is sort of similar here, where I seem to recall we had a similar discussion about, what happens if you want to send a capsule that may not be supported on a server opportunistically. And that sort of feels like the same thing here with the API issues question. So if we want to support redirects, I feel like the answer here, if you're definitely going with sending data over datagrams, is that you just have to assume that anything that you sent prior to getting a confirmation that the extended connect succeeded, just like as we did with the underlying mask stuff, that you might have to retransmit it. So in this case, I feel that what Martin was saying here around item potency is very clearly solved, that you get the redirect, you assume that all of that data was not processed. So unless I'm mistaken, I think we can fairly easily support redirects by simply saying that any data must not be processed if you send the redirect.
I'm seeing nods in the room.
So regarding flow control, so what happens if your flow control window decreases? between redirects.
Yeah, so Victor, that's a fair question. This is the case where you attempt on one connection and you've got a nice fat flow control window and you send, you know, a megabyte of stuff. Not that you should be doing that, but let's say you manage that and you get a redirect and then the next connection only has like 10K. What do you do with the extra stuff that you can't send? I think there's kind of an unavoidable sort of gotcha in terms of redirect processing, in that the client has to remember everything that's sent and then spend whatever time necessary to ensure that it gets sent again, which means
it's
waiting.
It's not only about bytes, but also about opening streams.
Yeah, so what streams are you opening again?
So imagine you start by opening 3 by unidirectional streams. And then you get redirected and you get redirected to a server. You connect to the server and the server says you can only send 2 streams at a time.
I see. Yeah. So it turns out that I don't think the client can open up any streams because the stream limit is 0. We don't specify a default? Well, the implied default is the quick one, right? Which is 0.
It's, well, that's for web transport over HTTP2, right?
No, it has to be. So Alan just said off mic, well, it has to be at least 3 streams. I'm like, no, that's just a requirement if you want to use HTTP3. We're talking about this right here. We're just talking about within the context of this one. That's hard.
Yeah, I would agree. At the same time, I do think what happens after I'm redirected is not massively different from what I would have done if I went there originally. So like if the thing that I'm running requires me to have 3 streams open, and I would have gone to a server that says, no, you can only have 2, like this is the same problem, right? So the fact that I was able to have to pack my connect with additional data that tries to open 3 that's not really the fault. Like that's not a problem related to redirects. That's just a generic problem in general. And I think right now it's pretty underspecified. So I think we need to do a little bit of writing to.
So at least for dedicated web transport over HTTP3, you can open as many streams as the quick transport settings allow you. And the reason I say opening streams specifically is that buffering data is something you can do transparently, but with opening streams, our API explicitly gives you a promise that is not resolved until the stream is actually opened.
Doesn't that apply in the same case though? If I try to connect to a web transport server that in H3 says, hey, you can't have that many streams and I needed that many streams, aren't I similarly stuck? Like it doesn't matter whether I got redirected there or not, I'm still stuck.
No, because as far as I remember, you can, but you learn the server max open streams initial before you get the server reply. That's a window in which you can open those streams.
Yeah, it just still doesn't mean that the thing I was trying to do with that many streams is going to work.
Why not?
So rather than try to come up with a solution to this problem here, I think we need to take this offline and have a bit of a discussion about what it is that we're doing here. I think Victor's right. This is much more difficult. I don't like the dedicated connection thing, but that's maybe something we have to grapple with. Maybe we need a new setting for that. Because in the pooled scenario, maybe you don't want clients just opening up new web transport streams for sessions that haven't been approved yet. And in the dedicated connection case, well, maybe it's okay to do that. So that's something that I think we're going to have to think about a little bit more carefully, because that changes the disposition toward this particular question quite a bit.
Martin, isn't that just like the flow control discussion that the design team had?
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. So that this is essentially the box of things that you open up when you start trying to do that kind of flow control limit and things like that. So I mean, I'm totally game to go try to figure that out offline, but I don't think we're going to answer it in the next half an hour.
Yeah, but just speaking as chair here, I think the output of the design team that we declared consensus on was like the flow control for that part is. Oh, right. No, we punted it out. That's true. So we didn't reach kind of consensus on it. So that's still like a nice landmine that we haven't decided how we want to step on. Thank you. So should we put a pin in redirects until we've solved flow control?
I'm not sure flow control specifically. We definitely, I think it's better to take it offline, because it's very clear that there are it sounds like there are unsolved design issues here. And we should either solve them or decide that they're not worth solving or should not be solved. But it doesn't sound like we're arriving to any conclusion at this meeting. So I suggest we move to the next.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the third issue, which is actually 3 issues which talk about roughly the same topic but different aspects of it, or maybe the same aspect of it, is that we have for unidirectional streams in web transport, we just have a unidirectional stream type, and we use that, and we put the session ID, and then it just works. For bidirectional streams, there are no stream types in HTTP3. So we made a special frame that just says everything else that's on this stream is web transport. And we can make that frame. It's legal because we use a setting to negotiate web transport support, meaning that we can alter the protocol. And then the question was, well, can you put anything before that? And during the last IETF meeting, we roughly agreed that the answer to that question is no, because we want to have consistency between what we do with bidirectional streams and unidirectional streams. So that is I think we have agreement on that. And Lucas, please correct me, because I'm trying to vaguely restate what you said in the issue/pull request, suggests that instead of doing that, we should just define bidirectional stream types, and as an extension to HTTP3, and there is a pull request to do this, and I will let Lucas advocate for it, because my current opinion on it, roughly, this has the same effect on the wire, so I don't think this is particularly worth it. But Lucas, please.
So I had a clarification question, but I think that's a great segue. Maybe Lucas can answer it. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, is this doesn't change the wire format in the sense that the bidirectional stream will always start with a varant that is an identifier, and that identifier will either be in the streams INR registry, so stream types INR registry, or in the frame types INR registry. That's what we're debating, is which registry, but it doesn't change what we're actually sending. Is that correct? I'm asking you, Lucas.
Okay, Lucas Pardy, Cloudflare. So I want to apologize for dropping the ball on this PR. I created it after the discussion at the last IETF or the one before that one. I can't remember. But the concern I had here isn't so much like what registry it lives in. I think if I recall correctly, it was more that I didn't like the idea that we have like HP3 frames that always look like this, except in this case it's a special thing and it's very different. And this changes how you would approach frame parsing if you wrote a generic H3 framing and state machine layer. If instead you kind of say when we're using web transport or an extension of this type, there is a way to convert the semantics of HB3 such that BIDI streams no longer become request streams. And this is a way to do that. The PRs in web transport, I think it's into a section of the document that's like, maybe we don't want to do this in web transport. And that maybe this is something we take to the HB working group and say, we designed HB3 for this use case, and we're trying to do other things with it. And this is an approach. So there were some good comments that you made on that PR, and some stuff has shifted on. I haven't had the time to go back and comment them. It's not something I want to give up on yet, because I haven't had the time to revisit it. If everyone hates it, that's okay, but I don't know. I just don't like the current design is my issue. And if I'm in the rough, then so be it. But I don't think we've had enough discussion around this yet.
Just to double check, is there any actual wire difference between what's proposed in your PR and what's
I don't believe it's a wire difference. It's a very nuanced kind of bike shed. It's a kiddie bike shed. Yeah, I'm just not in the right state to phrase that nuance correctly. Sorry.
As chair, I'll jump in and try to phrase the nuance, and please jump in and correct me, Lucas, if you think I'm doing it wrong. So in HTTP3, well, Quick has server-initiated bidirectional streams. In HTTP, it says you must not send them, and if you receive them, explode. So we know no one's sending them. But now we have magical super duper setting. So we know that we're in a different mode, and that setting tells you what you're allowed to send on this stream and how you're supposed to parse it. So we get to decide. And we have two options here. One is you send frames on HTTP streams, on server-initiated bidirectional streams in HTTP3 that have the web transport setting. That's a mouthful. And the other is you send a stream type. And I mean, as I'm saying this out loud, I'm realizing that this might be outside the purview of this working group. But I think that's the color of the bike shed is, do we want it to be frame types and have the wart that Luca described where we have a frame type that doesn't have a length? Or do we want stream types? I hope I didn't say them completely backwards every time. All right, that's the dichotomy. Let's discuss. I'm going to time box it so we don't face plant on it too much, but let's have a discussion.
Yeah, so thanks for that summary. It's reminding me of some stuff, which is good. The other problem I had with this is like, if you're building a stream parser like this, and yes, say it's a client request stream. This is the one we're concerned about, not the server BIDI stream, no one cares. So the client request stream, you have frames, and if you don't understand frames, extension frames, you ignore them. And what we're saying is we want to change some of that machinery too, such that when you receive this frame, it seems the property that we want is that web transport starts and converts the stream immediately into the mode that it needs. But by using a frame, what you end up with is effectively an infinite amount of stuff that could appear before that web transport frame. And that just seems completely pointless. And so you're making like another exception for behavior for web transport streams that I don't think we need. I think we should just say, if you're using web transport and you get the stream open and it has to start with this byte, otherwise there's something bogus going on. It's no longer a framed stream, it's something else, which is the property that we want, if I understand.
Yeah, so I'm not all that enthusiastic about the way in which this is sort of working out, because we have bidirectional and unidirectional streams, and the client initiated bidirectional streams have to have frames, and in order for us to do this, we have to choose a thing that sits the front of that stream that looks like a frame, or at least uses a number from the space that isn't, like, we have to register a frame type in order to avoid colliding there, right? So I don't want to have us fix the asymmetry between unidirectional streams and bidirectional streams only to create this problem with the others. So I think we're probably in a situation where unidirectional and bidirectional is the cleave that we're looking for. And then I think we have frames. Now, if we want to avoid putting a zero length thing, or like this weird thing without a length, we can just put a zero there, or we can just say, look, it is what it is. That's all fine. We can also define a rule that says this has to be the first frame that's on that stream. If we want to go that way, we've done that for other things. I think that's true of settings in H3 already. What I don't want to have happen is we lose the ability to distinguish our streams from their streams when they share the connection. So I'm like, neither here nor there. I would prefer to use the frame parser to do frame parsing on like the bidirectional streams, which potentially means it's wasting a byte for a zero length. I think zero length is easier than a whatever the other options we have for that field. Because most frame parsers will be type length something. And knowing that we have type length of 0 and nothing following it, it makes those stream parsers very much more easy. Well, we've got a session ID as well, of course. So I'm actually kind of okay with the current design with maybe a few tweaks.
I'm going to cut the queue soon, so if you want to talk about this, get in line now.
Okay, Meet Echo made this too tall. I'm kidding. No, it's okay. No.
This could come up like that.
I shouldn't have said anything.
Any other complaints, Alan?
I said the magic words that summoned people. Okay, I just shouldn't have done that. Alan Frendel. Okay, so I've implemented this as a frame, and I've put it in my frame parser, and it's gross because it has to be the first frame. It doesn't have a length. It completely changes all frame parsing after that. So I don't think if you're implementing this, I don't think you actually want to implement it inside your frame parser. I think what you want to do is treat it like a stream type. So before you even instantiate your parser, you're peeking at the first byte and you're saying, is this one of those special things that's not really frames at all? And then once you look, you're like, oh, look, it's one of the web transport ones. I will not instantiate my frame parser. I will just go do the web transport thing, just like QPAC has its own world of what it does that's not frames. It's something completely different. That said, Martin is 100% right that you've got to register them in the frame space of H3, because otherwise somebody could create an H3 extension frame that could be on a client initiated bidirectional stream, and that's not going to work. So, but I think, I don't know how many people are going to actually implement this who haven't already started. So maybe it's guidance for people that don't exist in the future, but I think having having it described in the document as a stream type and registered in the frame registry might be the thing that gets the most people to write the correct code here, rather than trying like, oh, it's a frame, I'll put it in my frame parser. And then like a week later, they're like, that was such a bad idea. What did I do? So, okay, that's all.
Thanks. Kazuo?
Kazuho. So I think my preference would be to actually have stream types for both client-initiated and server-initiated bidirectional streams. And the reason is because, if I understand correctly, when we developed HTTP3, we believed that bidirectional streams would only be used by H3. Therefore, we don't need any extension points. But now we think that we have to use them for our own purposes. And then the question is, would there potentially be another protocol that would coexist on the same connection that would also want to use bidirectional streams for other purposes? And if we think about that possibility, I think we need a clear separation, a clear way of separating the stream types, the type of the streams that's being used.
Thank you. Victor?
I kind of agree with the fact that you probably don't want to put this into your regular stream parser if that's the only thing. Okay, our current implementation puts it into the stream parser, but that's because we implement the version of the draft where it's allowed to appear not in the beginning of the stream. I don't think that streams without that frames without length are conceptually bad, because we had at least one other proposal for a frame without length that made sense and I found in past like actually useful. But in this particular case, I don't particularly care because I believe those are linked to the same thing on the wire.
Thanks, Victor. So I'm David Skenazy, speaking as an individual contributor here. So my first point is, I don't feel too strongly here. I'd much rather but whatever it is, even if it's a coin toss and progress rather than anything. But I think it's early enough that it's worth us discussing more on the list. I'm not saying, but anyway, my personal opinion is, since we need to register it in the frame type IANA registry no matter what, it makes sense to just keep it be a frame. One interesting property is, so the thing that kind of trips people up a little bit is that it doesn't have a length. One interesting thing we could do is if you set the length to 2 to the 62 minus 1, which sure, it's gross, where we're wasting 8 bytes. That's actually an interesting thing because the quick stream can only carry 2 to the 62 minus 1, and you've already burned 8 bytes for the length, however many for the thing. So you know that you're not going to go off the end of it anyway. So that effectively means taking over the whole stream. So you could use that as a must send the length to all of this. And seeing Martin make me a "that's gross, go away" face. So anyway, it was just a thought. But I'm just throwing the idea out there. I'm not pushing it so strongly. All right, Lucas?
Hey, yeah, so, I mean, hearing some people here, it doesn't seem like I'm that much in the rough wanting more of a stream type model. It doesn't seem like it needs to be web transport specific either. And I'm wondering if there's interest in trying to take this into just a small standalone ID to go back to the HP working group and say, look, there's at least one use case here that wants to repurpose client bidirectional streams. And here's a way you could do it. And what you need to do is go and define a code point for your specific use case, and then web transport can define that code point. We don't, in the IANA registry, yes, we need to avoid a frame type clash, but we can just reserve that code point. We don't need to call it anything. And therefore, a frame parser would see that and say, there's nothing I can do with this. Like, I probably need to if I'm going to try and parse that as a frame, I need to crash, because if I try and read the length, which is a humongous number, or garbage bytes after, like, I could have like serious problems here. Like, I'm concerned there's security problems related to that kind of thing.
Well, if the peer is sending you something bad and that makes you crash, you have a bug in your code. But anyway,
so let's not design something that is like so easily.
No, I agree. That's a fair statement. That this is that what I was saying is silly. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm just saying good.
But I'm willing to go and do some more work on this if people are interested. I might just do it anyway and see as a store person kind of thing.
Okay, that makes sense. Speaking as chair now to wrap this bit up, what I'm seeing is no clear consensus on one way or the other. And actually a good conversation of trying to figure this out. I'm not seeing people with disagreeing priorities or goals here, so this should be pretty straightforward to resolve. This sounds, I mean, let's take it to the list and discuss it there. If we can't resolve it on the list, I might suggest a like mini design team, or even just, you know, or an interim, whatever, just an excuse for people to get in a room and like spend a bit of time. I would normally say, oh, you should all grab lunch, but it's already Thursday afternoon. I see Lucas saying if anyone wants to go grab beer with him, that or he needs a glass of water. Maybe, yeah, go talk to Lucas after the session is a good idea as well. What I'm thinking as action items, I'm going to take an action item with Bernard to talk to the HTTP chairs, see how they feel about this, because neither of them are in the room right now, and this sounds like it could either be the, and just in terms of ossification, my gut feeling is that if whatever we design in WebTransport will probably cover every extension that wants to use bidirectional streams in HTTP forever, because in practice, like once you've set that setting, that's how it is. And so I'm sure they're going to want to have a say. So I'll discuss with them. My only concern is I don't want to delay this document too much. So I'll try to negotiate with them if it makes sense to have something fast tracked with them to like very tightly scoped to solving this problem. All right. And with that, Victor, I think you can keep going.
Oh, I think we're actually out of actual issues. There are some open pull requests that I would like people to look. And by would like people to look, I mean, I believe all of those already had consensus in some form or another. So especially the first one, we've agreed that we want to do this, but we've never agreed on the specifics. Everyone is welcome to take a look at this, and unless there are any objections, I will merge all of those. And that's it for my slides. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thanks, Victor. Oh, it's silly. There's this really neat feature now that I can get the slides back, but the presenters keep closing them. We just need to do some UI tweaks. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. The system isn't really designed for what we're doing, which is the entire slide deck is one thing. So just to confirm, folks, please review those PRs. And then we're going to merge them soon. Martin, want to come up for your? There we go. No, but I'll try to fix that right now. So go ahead, start, and then let me fix it. You can start talking while I fix it.
Okay. Well, I would really need my slides though. If you maybe could go to the next slide
Sure.
while you.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, let's talk about stream resets again. This is different from what we talked about in Quick.
Talk closer to the mic.
Okay, this is different from what we talked about in Quick. Just a quick recap. When you reset a stream, you stop retransmitting your stream frames. You only transmit the reset stream frame reliably. At the receiver side, you usually report the stream reset error to the application directly without waiting for any stream frames, since they are not delivered reliably anyway. So next slide. So this is how your how a general web transport HTTP3 setup would probably look like in every stack. At the bottom, you have your quick layer. Your quick layer accepts streams and hands them to the HTTP3 layer. And then HTTP3 parses the first frame, or as we've just discussed, the first variant, and decides what to do with that stream. It could be an HTTP request stream if you parse an H3 headers frame. Then you pass the stream to your HTTP handler. If you parse the frame type for the web transport stream, then you pass your stream to your web transport stack, which then might pass the session ID. How are we doing with the slides?
Yes, I just need to stop them to reshare the new ones.
Sorry for that.
All right. Oh, wait.
Nope. Okay. Nope.
I got this.
This one, yes. So the problem is what does your HTTP3 layer do when it receives a stream that is already reset and the stream frame carrying the first byte was lost. So we are now sitting there with the stream and we don't know if it's an HTTP request stream or if it's a web transport stream and then which session it belongs to. So next slide. The first option is to do nothing. Like what do you do in H3? You receive the stream, it's reset. You're like, oh, the client doesn't want the stream anymore. You immediately set a reset on your side of the stream, and the stream is gone. So you could say we do the same when you're running web transport on the same connection. You receive that stream, reset it, it's gone. The downside of this is that application protocols that are built on top of web transport might need that reset as a signal for some signal at the application layer. So if we decide to go with this option, we limit the kind of protocols that can be layered on top of web transport. Next slide. The second option is to use a reset capsule. We've already defined a bunch of capsules, and every web transport session has this one reliable stream, which is not closed until the web transport session is closed. So we could use that stream to send a web transport capsule, and I just made up that frame format that's not defined in any PR, but this is how it could look like. You just send this capsule on the request stream, on the control stream, and you know that it will be delivered reliably. So this sounds like an easy solution, but there are some problems with it. Next slide. So let's go back to our general stack, and we are now at the HTTP3 layer, and we have received a stream that is reset. Now what do? We haven't received the capsule yet. So this could be an HTTP request stream, but we don't know that yet. Or it could belong to a web transport session. So we now need to wait to see if we receive this capsule on one of our web transport sessions. And if we don't receive that capsule after a certain time, then we can conclude it was probably an HTTP stream, and then we can reset it. Which of course, now we have the problem like what's the right value for this timer? And there's probably no good answer because your capsule could have been lost, needs to be retransmitted, could have been blocked by flow control. Like there's just no good value for this timer. Things get even more complicated if you consider that there might be a second web transport session, which is not yet established, but the client has sent the connect request and has already optimistically opened the stream for that session, is now canceling that session by resetting the request stream. So now you're sitting there like this was a web transport stream, but you won't get the capsule because that session has already gone away. So it's not really clear what to do in that case. You would then run into your timeout and just reset the stream, and maybe give a wrong signal to the transport layer, to the application layer. Sorry. Next slide. That's the old slides. Okay. I mostly skipped slides, so this is fine. So with the reset capsules, there's like a lot of error conditions. I've walked you through one of them, but there's more. Like you could receive the reset capsule, but not receive the stream reset because there's no guarantee that the client is well behaved, right? The client could be attacking you and just sending you nonsense. So when you're implementing this, you need to be prepared to handle a malicious client. Could also be that the client sends multiple reset capsules on different sessions, all claiming the same stream, and you also need some logic for that, I guess. So there's just a lot of corner cases you have to think about with reset capsules. Next slide.
That was the next slide, wasn't it?
Yeah. So for the next option, I made new slides. So if you could pull those up, that would be really great.
Yeah, I did, and I hit the pull. But let me run through it again. 1 second. All right, hold on. I'm going to upload them with a different name. We got this. All right. 1 second. Choose file. All right, tell us a joke while I figure this out. Refresh. Import. Processing. Close. Present. There. All right.
Okay. So the third option is to solve this at the quick layer. And in the quick working group, I presented one proposal called reliable stream resets. That's not the only way to solve this problem, but it's just one proposal, and there were other proposals floating around to solve it in a similar but maybe less complicated way. Next slide. Next slide. So the question is, so for option 3, solving it at the quick layer, this has the obvious benefit of allowing the applications to react to every stream reset. It has very limited complexity at the web transport layer or at the HTTP3 layer, because when we receive a stream, we can rely on the web transport stream frame and the session ID being present. We're basically pushing that complexity to the quick layer. The reason we might want to do this is because web transport is probably not the only protocol that is sending some kind of identifier at the beginning of a stream. So solving it at the quick layer, one might argue, is the correct layering here. Downside is we need to define that that extension to quick, or the quick working group needs to work on this. Next slide. Or maybe there's no next slide.
Yeah, there is. Oh, no, that was it. That was it for your slides.
What do you think?
Thoughts, questions? Or Martin, while people queue up, do you want to share the other option that I think Matt had proposed? That was a take on your option 3, or like option 3B.
So if I understand correctly, the proposal was to extend not the to extend the reset stream frame not with a size variant, but basically with a data block. And in this data block, you would send the web transport stream frame.
So we can call that 3B for the purpose of this discussion. So just to set the stage, we have 15 minutes left. The chair is going to keep 5 minutes to wrap up. So we have 10 minutes to discuss this. Alan, go ahead.
Alan Frindell. Originally, when we talked about what is now called 3B, so this with some, instead of a reliable size, some amount of application data, which we get delivered to the application when it received a reset. I had thought that that wouldn't solve the case where you still don't know if you don't receive this. You have to wait for a while. You got to like, what do you put in here if it's not? I don't have a good idea. I was thinking it had a problem with HTTP streams, but I don't have a clearly formed idea. I'll get out of the queue.
Are you concerned about receiving a stream with a varint and only being able to read like the first byte of the varint, but the varint is actually longer? I mean, your stack needs to handle that anyway.
Yeah, no, of course. I need to.
Mike?
Just repeating what I said when we discussed this in Quick, this is actually a problem that H3 discovered it had just before we shipped the RFC. So it would be nice to see a solution to this more generally. Whether it's 3A or 3B, I really don't care. Odds are good you have two varants that you care about. It's probably shorter to just stuff them in here versus retransmitting, but if you already sent it and it has been acknowledged, then sticking this in is shorter. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. It's a couple bytes, but it fixes a real problem, albeit one that doesn't happen very often, we think.
Thanks. Jonathan?
Yeah, Jonathan Lennox. Would this quick extension be mandatory to implement from web transport implementations? Because if it isn't, then you sometimes get the unreliable resets case, which I think would be even worse because then you couldn't predict whether you could usefully use as an application signal. So I think if you're going to do this, it would need to be MTI for web transport implementations, but it has its own unfortunate implications. So I think that needs to be thought about.
And just to jump in as chair, we already have the datagram quick extension as mandatory to implement for web transport. So that's totally an option we have.
Yeah, I think we just add this to the checklist that we had on that previous slide. It's 4 things, now it's 5 things.
And counting.
I have a slight preference to the sort of partial delivery option here, as opposed to the metadata one. I think the metadata one creates some interesting challenges.
Sorry, can you explain what you mean by those 2 options?
Yeah, so this option that's on the slide is partial delivery. I'm going to say that I'm only partially delivering the contents of this stream up to this point.
Yep.
It's like saying, oops, I may have not provided you with a fin bit, or I've provided you with a fin bit, but I'm not going to deliver up to that. I'm going to deliver to something less than that. Right, so for this application, we can say that web transport streams, you have to provide a number in this one that is large enough to cover the session ID and the other piece that's in that frame, the type that's at the start. The other option also works, and I think I could probably live with that, which is to have some chunk of metadata in here that's arbitrary length and would be defined by the application there in some way. There's some interesting challenges with that one in terms of what happens if it's different to what the stream sent in the first place. And this is the sort of thing that I think Martin really wants to avoid here, is that there's never any ambiguity with this design as opposed to the one that has, oh, here's the information that you needed to process this stream.
Oh, so let me jump in to clarify because it's very relevant here. In the one that I was asking Martin to present was also the beginning of the stream. It wasn't separate metadata, at least in my view.
There's no guarantee that those bytes match, right? You're sending them in a different context, in the same way that you could send 2 stream frames with different bytes at different offset, at the same offset.
Right.
You would have the same here.
That's fine. We can already handle that.
Potentially.
So, or at least in my view, just to clarify, I was thinking of sending the beginning of the frame up until reliable size as part of this frame, not a separate
As a way of framing it. Yeah.
As part of this, call it whatever. That way, it's easier to implement and it's bounded to one packet. Sorry, just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, you can still have that problem, but quick implementations deal with this problem today in a non-deterministic fashion, which is really, really fantastic. And we could do the same here, I guess. So I'm kind of okay with either one of them. I think I have a preference for this one. It's smaller. You've already probably sent this information, and we can certainly require that people send this information anyway. And so from a practical standpoint, it's probably better. I'm just trying to think. Size-wise, it's about the same. If you have to send it, if you've already sent it, this is more efficient. There's a number of different. Sorry? There's always the mismatch chance, but the mismatch chance is like a constant in this design, and we've just created a new way to do it in the other design. I think that's probably what it comes down to. Now, of course, we need to have this discussion in the quick working group, because this is not the working group to generate the solution, but the requirement. And I think I'm getting the sense that the requirement is pretty solid.
Yeah, no, so the purpose of the discussion today in this room, speaking as chair, is to decide if we want to, let's say, option 1 and option 2 didn't involve the quick working group. It would be, we've solved this here, we're done. Option 3 or option 3B, whatever we're calling them, require, we now give the quick working group requirements, and we can all trundle over there and put our other hats on and discuss it there.
I suggest trundling in that case. More concretely, I think we've seen that this keeps coming up for basically everything that we ever build on top of Quick. And so I think it is very much worth trying to solve this in a generic way that will apply to WebTransport and others. I would actually have a slightly inverse take from Martin in that both of these seem workable, and I have a slight preference for the other one. But that we can sort out within Quick. It seems as though the ability to mismatch what you do in WebTransport and what you put in Quick is going to exist in any case, no matter what you do. And so it may be that it's simpler to just say, hey, here's my attribution for this, rather than trying to deliver a part of the actual stream data. But that's something we can take to Quick.
Kazuya.
So I think the two options that we have on the both ends of the table is if we want to fix this problem in a generic sense, or if we want to do a quick fix. And the generic solution being a fix into the quick protocol, I think the concern is if you can reach a consensus there in a short time frame, and if that consensus is going to be something very simple to implement. Because unless we meet those two conditions, it would drag the standardization and the implementation of WebTransport.
May I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
By consistent, do you mean consistent spec-wise, or are you worried about implementation complexity?
Well, so what I said is reach a consensus regarding how to fix this in quick spec.
Oh, you said consensus. Okay,
Right,
sorry, I didn't get it.
And regarding that consensus question, my concern about this specific proposal is that it's not concrete enough to solve all the issues that we had in H3, like recognizing a push at very end of a large response, and they're having to send a reference to it. So there would be discussion like that if we move this to quick working group. So I think my slight preference would be to fix this in this working group.
David Skenazy speaking as an individual. Well, first speaking as chair, I've cut the queue, and please keep it short because we're running out of time. Now speaking as an individual, I initially really wanted to fix this in WebTransport for the exact reasons Kazuo was saying, to like get this done. But like after seeing Martin's presentations and discussing like offline this week, I'm convinced that there's a real problem, and I begrudgingly am in favor of solving this generically at the quick layer. And that's that. Victor?
I also agree that we should solve at the quick layer, because last time we had a similar problem and we did not solve it at upper layer. We came to regret this, and I'm referring to LPS. But like in general, if there is a correct layer to solve the problem, we should solve that problem at that layer. And I don't think it is actually that much more expedient to solve it at WebTransport layer in this case.
Okay, thanks, Victor. Luke?
Hi. Yeah, I agree with solving it correctly. I will say for web transport, I would just send the reset stream after you get an ACK of the reliable size. Like you don't need to send the reset immediately. You can hold it until you know that they've got the reliable data. But I'd like to avoid that extra like round trip or two, and this would be a way of doing it.
Thanks. Alan?
Alan from Dell. I'm not sure that works because a transport ACK doesn't mean the H3 stack has seen the data. It can still get reset before. So I think we should be solving it at the quick layer. I will say that maybe we are taking a little bit the spicy take for the end of the meeting, a little bit too narrow a view on what the problem is. The problem is that applications like to group things, and that we maybe should provide a way to identify those groups on the wire, not maybe at least in reset stream, but maybe also stream. And that would also potentially make some web transporty things easier, or the server push thing easier, or other applications people want to build. It might be interesting. So
that would be an option 3C then.
I'm sorry.
I would assume that would be an option 3C.
I mean, that one is probably not expedient. It's probably going to generate some controversy, or maybe not. I don't know. But this is something we have talked about internally. We've actually implemented in our stack already, the ability to group streams and have that be part of the API and an extension on the wire. So it could be something interesting.
Thanks, Alan. Lucas?
Lucas Pardue wearing no hats. Not being a web transport implementer yet, just a keen backseat enthusiast. Yeah, the capsule thing could kind of work. Solving it this way, whatever final solution we pick, seemed better to me. Hence why, you know, we wanted some of that discussion in quick. I think, yeah, it's good to see that other people are kind of agreeing with what I thought. Well, it doesn't matter if I was wrong or we were wrong, that's fine. But yeah, like I think it seems like it's emerging that we should try and solve it properly. Web transport could have, but you know, if we got paging enough context in now to understand the problem a bit, like let's try and write that and codify the solution.
Thanks, Lucas. And stay there and put your hat on. I'm going to need you soon. Speaking as chair, I'm getting a sense in the room that most folks prefer solving this at the quick layer. Kazeel, can you live with that? Or does anyone else object to solving this at the quick layer? And we're not prescribing a specific solution, but it would be going to quick and saying, we need this problem solved at your layer, please.
I believe that, yeah, I think we can discuss this at the quick working group. I'm not sure if there would be a consensus soon. That's my only concern.
And to be fair, if it starts dragging on forever and quick, we have the option here to change our mind. Like, okay, so I'm gonna say as chair, we're gonna start moving that. We're gonna move the discussion to quick, saying that we have this problem, and the folks in the room at Web Transport preferred that. And that thread, people are still completely welcome to say that they want to absolutely do it in Web Transport and not do that. That's still fair game. We're not declaring an official consensus here, but we're going to go in that direction. And so, Lucas, like as chair, can we perhaps try to like maybe have a specific quick interim on this topic or something? You don't need to reply to right now, but to try to fast track this work.
With my hat on, I'll say it's completely in scope of work in our charter to do this kind of thing. We have a fairly quiet work queue right now, so we have the capacity. In terms of interim, I'll need to go away and chat to people and have a think. Obviously, we have stuff like the mock interim coming up in January potentially, so scheduling might be difficult there. And I don't know what timelines, but yeah, let's not consume everyone here right now. To figure that one out, we'll take it offline.
Yep. All right. That's that on that topic. Thank you, Martin. Okay, I think we have plans. This went well. Bernard, do you have anything you want to add?
No, just we should probably start to keep track of all the things we need to do to close out web transport, because we don't want to let some of these things drag on for years.
Agreed. I'll take action items to go talk to the HTTP chairs and the quick chairs, and we can all play the game of swapping hats to try to get this done quickly. And that's that. Thanks everyone for coming to Web Transport. We will see you on the list. If you're not subscribed to the quick or HTTP lists, you should, because we're going to have discussions very relevant to Web Transport there. Thanks for everyone, and see you virtually.
What's your typing speed, man? I said, what's your typing speed? Just coming in and ripping words.
Oh man, spelling is so whatever it is about the.
Yeah. I mean, the shape of it is pretty much done. We're figuring out the details at this point. Which is a good thing.